How's it going, guys? Kevin Cleary with a knife video for you. I want this to be kind of a fun discussion video. I hope you guys will weigh in the comments below. I want to share some thoughts with you, and I'll tell you how this video came about. Okay, the last few days I put up a couple of knives for sale or trade, and you get all these trade offers for different things from different people, and a lot of times I don't know what they are. You know, yes, I have a big collection, I'm interested in knives, but I can't know everything. And so, you know, someone will say, hey, I've got this, whatever, would you take it in trade? And sometimes I don't even know what this knife is, and so I've got to, you know, I go and look it up, and I do some research, and I find out what kind of steel it's made out of, and, you know, how it performs, and what, you know, even something, I'd even try to find out some things about the company. Is this a company that I'm interested in, that, you know, I ought to have some videos on my channel about because it's really popular or something. So I'm doing a bunch of research on a number of different blades, a number of fixed blades, because I'm kind of on a little fixed blade kick right now. And I get this over and over again, and this is true of folders and fixed blades and you know, even machetes and tomahawks and stuff, okay? So what you hear repeatedly is something along the lines of, this is the only one knife you need for everything that you could think of. You know, it will skin a deer, and it will whittle, and it will, you know, carve out a bowl and a spoon and a you know, table and chair, dining room table. You know, if you need to carve all that out in the bush, this knife will do it all for you. It'll make feather sticks, and it'll chop down trees, and it will, you know, everything you could think of. Okay, and so I have some questions about that, and I even wonder about that approach in general to, you know, knife making and knife design. Okay, I think a great example is the Thom Browne Tracker. Really a well-known knife, but for most people who actually know, you know, if you start looking at reviews of that blade, most people don't really like it. You know, and I think part of the reason they don't like it is because it tried to be everything. Now, I've never tried one, and if someone offered me one, you know, I would kind of, just out of sheer curiosity, I'd like to take one out to the bush for a few hours and just mess with it and see what it can do and what it can't do. But anyway, that's besides the point. I want to come back to this whole idea of one knife to do everything and ask some questions about it. Okay, so the first question is, what do you mean by do everything? Okay. When you talk about one knife to do everything, I think everything means something different to different people. You know, if you're a firefighter or a police officer or a soldier, you know, all of those jobs, I would suggest, would have a different definition of one knife to do everything. And so really we should probably say, this is the one knife to do everything I need. And you know, maybe I'm a farmer, or maybe I'm a guide, or maybe I'm an avid hunter or a fisherman. And I think in all those situations, it would be different. Further, I think most hunters, most fishermen, and a lot of just serious outdoorsmen would say, yeah, that's not realistic, because I need a bone saw, okay? And I need a, you know, a good skinning knife with some nice belly and a thin edge on it. And I need a fillet knife for the fish that I catch. And those are very different styles of blades. And is there really going to be one knife that can do all of those things well? I kind of doubt it. Okay? So that becomes a big part of the question. And then there's food prep. We haven't even talked about food prep, which is probably, and if we're totally honest, guys, most people in the world, okay, use a knife more than anything else for preparing their food. You know, even I do that. And I will say, I use knives that I probably shouldn't for food prep for no other reason than I want to see how they slice through materials. You know, if a knife can cut tomatoes but not potato, then that tells me something about the edge geometry. And if a knife can cut meat really well, that tells me something about how it's going to perform in a tactical role or a combat role. I know I try to avoid that term tactical. So what do we mean by everything? Okay, and I'm going to make this suggestion, and correct me if you think I'm really wrong, but I don't think I'm far off on this. I think often what we mean by everything is, this is a knife that, hey, if you get lost out in the woods, you can just, you know, you can build a whole campsite from scratch, and you know, you'll be better off after a week in the woods. You'll be better off than you were when you went in. You know, you'll be able to find food and make fire and build shelter, and you name it, you'll be able to do it. Okay, now here's one of the challenges that I want to come up with that. Okay, so the first thing I want to ask is, what does everything mean? And I think I've demonstrated that it probably means different things to different people. For some people, this VR71, which is an awesome blade, I totally love it. The review on this is going to be very positive, as it would be probably most Brose blades. There's some that I don't like aesthetically, I just don't like the way they look. But I've never had a Brose blade that didn't perform well. Okay, anyway, so maybe for you the VR71 is the knife that does everything, because what you mostly do is, you know, slicing tasks, or maybe you need it as a firearm backup, and you go, yeah, oh, those are the two things I really need, and so the VR71 does everything for me. Maybe the SGHF9, which is a great hard use blade, quite a chopper, is the knife that for you does everything. You can see super thick blade stock here, and this knife has been, as you can see, very well used by me. This has spent a lot of time on my hip in the woods, and I really like it. In fact, man, Schrade is a great company if you want a budget knife, no question about it. So, you know, but here's the thing, okay? In an emergency situation where something bad has happened, your plane crashed in the middle of nowhere, or your boat sank and you had to swim to shore, how realistic is it that you're going to have this knife on you? Okay, can this knife make a shelter in the woods? I would say it could probably make a shelter, and it can probably process a lot of wood. It can do a whole lot of things. But is it realistic at all to expect that this is the knife that I'm just going to happen to have on me the time that my car dies in the, you know, in the middle of nowhere in Northern Ontario? You know, probably not. Now, I will say I do keep this knife actually in my car, so it would just so happen that I would have it with me. But for most people, that's not going to be the case, okay? This is a pretty specific knife. And by the way, it's a great chopper, but here's one of the challenges that comes with building that one knife to do everything. This can chop and process wood pretty well. It can kind of make feather sticks, but the edge geometry on this thing is not that great, okay? There's a lot of steel here, and because of that, this does not slice well at all. You know, if this was your camp knife, you're going to have a hard time cutting up your meat at the end of the day. You know, if you've killed an animal and now you're going to try to skin it out, good luck skinning an animal with this thing. It is a behemoth. All right? And so, you know, is this the one knife to rule them all? I would say no, but it's a good knife for what it's meant for. All right? How about a knife that gets tons of discussion as an EDC blade and as a really tough, you know, survival knife, the Essie Azula. This is a really awesome knife, and actually I do EDC this knife quite a lot. I've been working on a series that I'm going to put up here about EDCing a fixed blade, and this knife is going to be one of the knives that we discuss within that series of videos. I think I'm going to do a few different videos, but great knife. It's pretty good for a lot of tasks. However, the edge geometry, once again, is not that great. Certain EDC tasks, it may not perform that well for you because the edge geometry is only mediocre. Here's another blade. Okay, this is specifically marketed by Camillus as a survival knife, and it even has, if I can get it out, okay, for now we're going to forget it, but it even has a fire steel here in the back, and this is a knife I do keep in a survival kit. It's just a small sort of backup survival kit, but you know, here's a knife that, you know, will it really do everything? If you were lost in the woods, you'd be glad to have a knife, and if it was this knife or any knife, you'd probably be glad to have it. But how practical is it to suggest that this knife, or how realistic is it to suggest that this is the knife that would keep you alive? Maybe it would, and it'd certainly be better than nothing, but again, I ask the question, is it realistic to try and design a knife to do everything? Okay, so that's the next thing I want to talk about, because I want to talk about some knives that I really like, and I like them specifically because they don't do everything. So this is the SE3. This is a great little blade, really good as an EDC. Okay, I have EDC'd this quite a lot, and I'm doing that purposely in preparation for a review. But guess what? I actually like it enough that even if after the review is done, this is going to be a knife that I will carry. Now, it's not this super overbuilt, so thick, crazy thing like this, okay? I would say maybe the SE4 or 5, one of those is quite a heavily built knife. But I really don't chop with my knife. And so outside of chopping, this is really going to do almost everything that you would need to do in like a bushcrafting scenario. And so for me, this is a great blade. Does it do everything? No. But guess what? If this was designed to do everything, it wouldn't cut as well as it does. It wouldn't be as lightweight as it is. It wouldn't be as easy to carry every day as it is, okay? And so one of the things I want to suggest is maybe it's not that realistic, to want that one knife that does everything. Got the SOG Seal Pup Elite here. Again, a really good knife. By the way, the edge geometry on this is even better than the SE3. Now, there's not as much belly here, so it's not going to do as well in all tasks, but it's a little more geared toward combat. Okay, so let me show you these two blades together. And I think both of these, if you are in a situation where you need a knife that you may have to use as firearm backup, or to defend your life or save your or affect self-rescue in some way, I think both of these would be fine, and I'd be glad to have either one of them. Notice, by the way, they are both fixed blades, and I think fairly capable fixed blades. However, this one is not nearly as well suited to the bush as this one, and this one's not probably nearly as well suited to a tactical role as this one, although I think both of those could flex back and forth. What I want to say about this is I really like both of these knives, and both of them have better edge geometry. In fact, they both have better edge geometry than this knife, and that doesn't mean I don't like the Izula. I actually do like the Izula, and as I've said, I EDC this knife quite frequently, but both of these slice better, and most of my EDC tasks involve slicing. Now, I will offer this limitation. I have the nylon sheath for my Hunts Point, and that makes it not that practical as an EDC. Because like this is what you've got hanging off your belt, okay? Now I meant Seal Pup. SOG Hunts Point, by the way, I do think would be a great EDC knife if you could. You'd have to either make your own or get a Kydex sheath for it that you could carry, because it's not big, it's not tactical, it's not combat looking, and so that's really good. Anyway, so what I'm showing you there is that I think those knives work well, largely because they weren't trying to be everything, okay? Now, I've got a couple of folders that I want to share with you as well. Sometimes people need to buy everything, just a knife that can do most EDC tasks but still be somewhat combat ready. And so the Byrd Caracara, this is the G10 Caracara, I think is a great option. Okay, it's not overly tough. It's not the most durable knife in the world, but it's more than durable enough for most everything that a typical person's going to need it for. All right, and so is this a knife that does everything? Well, in some ways, yes, it is. If we really want to talk about something that can do everything, we haven't even brought up multi-tools yet. This is a Gerber, I can't even think of the name of it, doesn't really matter. It's the one that's normally issued, or it's a variation of the one that's often issued to Canadian military. And it's a good multi-tool. I've got a fair bit of use on it, and it's never been an issue for me. But man, you think about what all this can do, even compared to a typical folder. There's the and here I'm talking about something that will do a lot, but how many tasks can this do that this can't do? Quite a few, right? And so maybe this is more of the tool that does everything than this is. Okay, so this I've got for a very specific reason. Multi-tools have the inherent weakness of being able to, yes, the strength of being able to do everything, but they can't really do anything well. Okay, and if I'm going to put in a bunch of screws, I'm not going to go and pull this out because it's a pain in the neck, to be honest. I've used it to put lots of screws in and out, and it's awkward. Okay, and I've never had a multi-tool that wasn't a little bit awkward for when you're doing a repetitive task, because they're not meant for a repetitive task. They're meant for that one-off type of situation. Now, another question has to be asked. What about these knives like the Farium Forge Ferrex. This is a much more expensive knife. It's very strong, very overbuilt. And, you know, if I got lost in the woods with this in my pocket, would I, one, be glad to have it? Yes, I would. Would it outperform something like this? No question. Would it outperform something like this? No question. However, guess what? For a lot less money, I could buy this. And which one would I rather have with me if I was lost in the woods? I can tell you, every time I would take the Essie. Okay, now this knife you don't just buy because you're thinking of the worst case scenario. This is a great knife. It's easy to carry. It's a functional design. It's aesthetically, it's attractive. It's comfortable. Very hard use knife, no question about that. But not as hard use as a fixed blade. And so there are other reasons to own this knife, and I love it for different reasons. But again, I'm coming back to, is it realistic to have a knife that will do everything? Now, one thing I do want to comment here is, you know, and I think you guys know what I'm driving at, all right? I prefer to have a knife that does what I want it to do, okay? And what I find is that knives that are designed to do something else, okay, let's make a knife that chops and slices and stabs, and it can be tactical, and it can be bushcraft, and it can be EDC, and you know, what is it, a Ginsu 2000? Like, now I'm starting to sound like an infomercial. And I don't think that that's realistic, and I don't even think that it's necessarily helpful, okay? Because often you end up with a knife that maybe it can do a lot, but you end up with the multi-tool syndrome where it can do a lot of stuff, but it can't do anything really well, okay? So we've talked about size, we've talked about construction, we've talked a little bit about cost. This is another example of an expensive knife, and one of the reasons it's expensive is because it is marketed as this overbuilt, super tough, super awesome blade. Okay, now I'm using this to kind of stand in for a Hinderer. It's the ZT Factory Custom, but you know, it can stand in quite nicely for the XM18 or for the Eclipse, which is of course what it's modeled after. Again, great knife, really love it, EDC it, perfect. Is it capable above and beyond an EDC? Absolutely. There's no question at all about that this is more capable than a lot of knives that I've already shown you, especially folders. But it's not a knife that does everything, and one of the reasons I like it is because it's not designed to do everything. Okay, now I think we want to come full circle and point out that, you know, everything means different things to different people. Everything often isn't helpful as a design feature because it ends up meaning a knife that doesn't do anything very well. Number three, it's not terribly realistic to expect one knife to do everything. And the other thing that I only hit on, but I want to readdress here, is it's not even realistic to expect that you'll have that knife with you. Okay, and so the most important knife in an emergency situation is the knife you actually have. Okay, so as I said, hey, this knife would be great in the bush, but the chances of me having this on me when I get in a plane crash is zero, because I'm not allowed to bring anything like this anywhere near a plane. Okay, could you put a fixed blade in your carry-on so that, I mean, not in your carry-on, in your checked luggage, so that, you know, the plane crashes, well, I can go find the luggage and find my bag, and I guess, you know, what are the chances of that working for you? Probably slim. But, okay, so that's the other thing we need to consider. Not only is it unrealistic to design a knife that'll do everything, but it's unrealistic to expect, if you did come up with the knife that would do everything, that you're actually going to have it when you are out in the woods. Okay, rather, I think it would be better to know the strengths and weaknesses of a particular knife that you're carrying and be able to apply those strengths and weaknesses in an emergency situation. Okay, so you go, hey, I better not pry with this because I'm going to break it and then I've got no knife at all. Rather, I'm going to use it appropriately so that I can get as much as I can out of it in this emergency situation. You know, and I think the same is true if, let's say, the emergency is a tactical situation. You are behind enemy lines or you're in combat. Okay, a knife like this, there's some intimidation factor, and maybe you'd want to pull this and present it and say, hey, back off. I've got a knife, get away from me, let's drop this before it becomes lethal for someone, okay? A knife like this, probably that's not going to work. So a knife like this is probably a knife where it's better felt than seen, okay? And you're better off to use this in a way that the person in the conflict doesn't even know you have a blade until it's too late, where this knife may be able to de-escalate a situation. So what I'm saying there is it's better to know the strengths and weaknesses of the knife you have and use it accordingly. And that way, any knife can become a knife that can do anything, or at least you can get more use out of it in a situation where you really need it. Now let's go back and talk finally about the positive side of this. So what do? Do we abandon making knives that are flexible? I don't think so, because I think there are some great knives that are really flexible. How many times have I mentioned the Cold Steel Code 4? In terms of an everyday carry knife, it's a great blade and it'll do all kinds of things. Now, is it the knife I would pick if I was going to be lost in the forest? No. But, boy, I'd be glad to have it. And I think it would outperform a lot of other similar blades from similar companies at a similar price point. Certainly, or same with the Recon One or the American Lawman or the Huntsman. Okay, you know, the Ferex. Would it be a knife that would do everything? No, but it'll do a lot, and I'd be glad to have it. So here's one positive thing. I would suggest a healthy approach would be owning and carrying a couple of blades. Okay, I can tell you right now, when I go backpacking or when I go out camping with my son or my family, I'll probably carry a knife like this, more dedicated slicer, a cutting tool, and I don't have one in here with me, but I'll carry a hatchet or a tomahawk for chopping. Okay, so I don't need to carry a knife like this that's a chopper because I've got a dedicated chopping tool. Okay, so I don't need to carry this. All right, this, well, it's a pretty good general cutting tool. Maybe it's not as tactical or maybe as combat ready as this. And so if I'm in a situation where I think there's a potential for combat, hey, I want this knife. Now, can it flex and do other things? Yes, okay? So what I'm suggesting here is instead of expecting one knife to do everything, what if you made a list and said, hey, I want a knife that can do fill in the blank. You know, I want a knife that can do bushcrafting really well. Great. And there's the knife I've got for that job. And I want a knife that can do really good at chopping. And there's the knife, or better yet, a hatchet or even an axe. You know, if you're chopping down a tree, bring an axe, right? And there's the knife that's good for that job. And I want a knife that's good for around camp, okay, for cutting up my son's hot dog so that it's in bite-sized pieces for him. Well, do I want to use this? Definitely not, okay? Maybe this would be my knife for around camp because it's easily carryable and it's a full flat grind, so it's going to be excellent for food prep. Okay, so what I would suggest instead of, or as an alternative to one knife to do everything, is what if you made a list of the 5 things, okay, that you want a cutting tool for, and fill in the appropriate blanks with an appropriate tool. Okay, then of that list, maybe you have another list that says, hey, here's my job. Maybe I'm a farmer, or maybe I'm a truck driver, or maybe I'm a doctor or an architect, maybe I'm a construction worker, and whatever that job is, there's probably a folding knife, an everyday carry knife, either EDC or fixed blade. Folding knife or fixed blade. Maybe there's a knife that is really suited to your environment. Okay, and so maybe for you that's a Boker Subcom, right? And for someone else it's an XL Voyager. Okay, so the point that I want to make with that is then after you've got your knives for your specific roles, so you're going out camping or you're going fishing or you're going hunting, you're going on a bike ride, you're going running, and now think about this, maybe you're a runner and sometimes you run in an urban area, there's probably a good knife to carry for that. But maybe sometimes you do trail running where you could run into an animal or you could need something more substantial. So probably there's a different knife for that, okay? And so look at your lifestyle and look at the things that you do and the demands that you're going to place on your knife that you're going to carry in your pocket all day, every day. and pick one based on that, okay? So if you need a combat knife, right, then carry a combat knife. If you're a soldier or a police officer, you're an FBI agent or you're special ops, or you need a knife for firearm backup because you are in a situation where dangerous things happen to you sometimes, great. Then pick accordingly. But don't suppose that you're going to pick that one knife that's going to be primarily for combat, but then you're going to expect it to do everything else you could think of as well. There are probably better knives more suited to that. Okay. Finally, and maybe, here's one other suggestion that I wanted to make about this. Maybe you narrow down your list and you go, hey, if I buy this knife, it's a knife I really like anyway, and it really could serve, okay? SE3. Could this be a soldier combat knife? I think so. Maybe a little small. There's not a whole lot of reach here, but, you're probably carrying a gun for those long distance engagements. So could this be a soldier's knife? Yep. Could it be a bushcrafter's knife? Yep. Could it be a farmer's knife? Yep. Could it be an office worker's knife? Yeah, probably not. Okay. So it may be that you can find one knife that fills a number of those categories that I talked about, and I think this would be a good option for a lot of those. Maybe for you, this is the better option. Maybe you work in a doctor's office and you want to carry a fixed blade, and so you carry this as a neck knife, right? Or you put it horizontally on your belt so it's not easily visible. Or you wear cargo pants and you tuck it into one of the pockets that easily fit in the pocket of cargo pants. Okay? Maybe this is the knife that you take to the office because it's kind of cool looking and interesting, and no one's going to be threatened if you pull this out to cut open your Snickers bar that day. Okay? So, I just, I know this video is kind of long and it's kind of rambling, but I wanted to talk about this constant discussion that I keep seeing and hearing about the one knife that's just going to do everything. And one, I kind of doubt whether or not it exists, okay? And two, I think if it did exist, I don't know if I'd want it because it wouldn't be very good at any one of those things. I think you'd be better off with a knife specifically suited for the tasks that you want to do. All right, so there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and make your comments below. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback about this issue. Maybe you've seen a bunch of reviews as well. Maybe I'm guilty of this, and you can point out a video where I said, hey, this is the one knife to rule them all. I'm sure I have. But I'd love to hear your take on this. I'd love to hear your 5 knives or how you would designate those categories yourself. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that gets you thinking as well, and we'll talk to you soon.